Horse Smoke by Marten Cordial. It was the same dream every night. He saw a field of lavender gripped by a hurricane. Everywhere were purple flowers racked and torn by screaming winds, while above black clouds boiled and churned. The storm was suffocating, the air so thick that he felt he was drowning, fighting for breath in his sleep. Amidst the tumult, he saw a figure in the center of the storm. It was a woman, dancing, spinning with the cyclone's wild motion, her hair streaming with the wind. Shredded slivers of lavender flew around her like a veil, so he could not see her face. She spun about again and again, and the storm spun with her, and no matter how loud he called to her, she didn't hear. When Erling woke, gasping, heart-pounding, he could taste smoke. It was like this every morning. He woke up more exhausted each day. He could barely get out of bed, let alone drag himself to work on the farm. The farm had been Dad's pride and joy, and it was all they had left of him now. But every day that Erling stayed here, the dreams got worse. The property fell deeper into disrepair. Mum spent entire days sitting by the window with the same cold cup of tea. Erling knew that the farm was his responsibility now. On the death of the father, the land went to the eldest male. That was Kalamak law. But when Erling sat down with the deeds, the financials, the accounting of livestock, his head pounded, and he smelled smoke. Erling didn't know where to go, but he knew he couldn't stay, so he crept from the homestead before dawn. He stepped carefully over the squeaky floorboards, trying not to wake Mum. He went out the back door so the chickens wouldn't fuss. He eased his car down the driveway with the headlights off, rolling through the pre-dawn gloom. The homestead was painted in soft grey shades, the moonlight muffled by cloud. As he rolled past the livestock pens, a couple of forlorn horses watched him leave. Each horse was kept separately in its own fenced enclosure, and each had a barcode stamped on its flank. The horses would be picked up by the bureau this afternoon. In their big, dark eyes, Erling saw reprobation. Erling shook the thought from his head, and he turned onto the Interstate 75. He was 10 miles down the road before he could breathe deeply again. Mum would wonder where he went. His brother Chico would too, and cousin Belle. But Erling didn't know how to explain himself to anyone. He just knew that he had to drive. So he turned on the radio, loud, to drown out his doubts. Erling was doing 50 down the highway when he heard a strange clacking sound. He had just stopped to fill up at a gas station. Was something loose in the car? Something wrong with the engine? He slowed down a little, but the clacking just got louder. It was a rhythmic sound, like drumming, 4 urgent beats repeating. Was he still dreaming? He eased off the gas pedal and gripped the steering wheel tighter. You could feel his pulse thumping in his neck. The sun still hadn't surfaced. There was only a faint orange glow lurking on the horizon. It reminded Erling of the furnace at the farm. His head started to ache. Then something caught his eye in the rear-view mirror, and Erling saw the source of the clacking noise. It was a horse, a grey horse, galloping on the road behind him, hooves drumming on the tarmac, the orange dawn gleaming in its mane. And there were riders on the horse, 2 faces whooping and laughing. The sight was surreal, impossible, forbidden. Erling stared with awe and with dread, and then with a jolt, he recognized his brother Chico and cousin Belle. With shaking hands, Erling pulled over and got out of his car. The clacking noise slowed, then ceased, as the horse clopped to a halt beside him. "Cuz," said Bloody Belle, "you need to check your rear view more often." Belle was sitting behind Chico on the horse, arms around his waist. They were all sweaty and puffing from their wild sprint, riders and animal both. Belle's cheeks were flushed, her hair blown into a tangle. Chico was missing a shoe. He coughed up a bug. The horse whickered. What are you doing with this?" Erling said, dumbstruck. He stared at the huge animal. Its coat shone with sweat. It had a bureau barcode on its flank. "Did anyone see you?" he hissed. "Get it back to the farm." "Relax," Chico said, looking down on his older brother from the back of the horse. "No one's out here. I ride all the time at night." He shrugged, hiccuped, and almost lost his balance on the horse. He appeared to be either very hungover or still drunk. "Real question is, what are you doing with my car?" "It's not your car," Erling fumed. Chico was always borrowing his car. "Well, I need it today," Chico said. "So you can't go run off with it in the middle of the night." "It's morning." Erling felt the heat rising in his chest. He and Chico had been having these arguments ever since they could speak. He knew the spats were stupid, and that only made him angrier that he kept participating in them. "If someone sees you riding a horse, the whole farm could be confiscated. You know that the Bureau—" "Boys," Belle interjected. "Boys, now is not the time for arguing. Now is the time for waffles." She clasped her hands together and smiled, beneficent, like a saint. Always the master conciliator, Belle. "There's a diner back by the gas station, and I'm starving." Erling looked back toward the gas station, and then out to the glow in the east. Color was creeping back into the world. The horse wasn't grey, it was chestnut. Erling looked his brother in the eye. "Chico," he said, "take the horse back home, please. Along the back way, not the main road. Get to the farm before someone sees. Before Mum sees." Chico opened his mouth to argue and then closed it. He looked at Belle and then back to Erling. "You owe me waffles, bro," he said, and turned the horse towards home. Erling drove back towards the diner, with Belle in the passenger seat. "Chico was giving me a lift home when we saw you by the gas station," she explained. "He was so pissed that you were driving his car. He just had to chase after you. On the horse. Have you ever ridden a horse? Chico must have taken you sometime. Oh, Earl, when we were racing up behind you doing the what's it called, cantering, I almost fell off. I could have died," she laughed. "I tell him not to ride the horses. I know it's not allowed, but it was only to get to Fran's place and back at night when no one would see. And it's fun, Earl. Horse rides are so fun." Belle sighed happily. "The party was great too," she continued. "Fran's auntie brought her stereo and we all did karaoke. Chico munted in the dam. You should have been there." Erling said nothing. He should have been there, but instead he had been dreaming of a storm. Belle hadn't slept all night, but unlike Chico, she showed no signs of slowing down. She chatted animatedly, buzzing, all the way to the diner's door. For a roadside diner next to a gas station, it was nice. The windows offered a wide view of the scrubby hills in the north and of the wide expanse of the 75, stretching into the east. The diner was almost empty. The only customer was a grizzled older woman sitting at a counter, nursing a coffee. A waitress emerged from the kitchen, a plump, middle-aged woman. "Morning, folks. I'm Sruthi. I'll look after y'all today," she chirped. "Take a seat anywhere." Erling headed for a booth by a window. "Not there," Sruthi said sharply. "Not there?" Erling stopped and frowned. For a moment, Sruthi frowned back, but then she broke into a smile. "Nah, that's just my little joke. Just my joke. You sit wherever you like, sweetie." Bloody Belle laughed. "Come on, sweetie. Let's take a seat." Erling sat. It was too early for this. Sruthi heaved 2 hefty menus onto their table. Each landed with a weighty thump. "Just my little joke," the waitress repeated. "You can sit wherever you like. This booth is fine. It is haunted, though." She waved an index finger at Erling and Bell in turn, in warning. "Quite haunted, this booth, yes. My husband died sitting in that seat right there," she declared, pointing at Erling. Erling shifted uncomfortably and gave a non-committal smile. Was this another little joke? "Heart attack," Sruthi pronounced. "Massive heart attack. Every valve and ventricle busted at once. Blam!" She pounded the table, and the cutlery rattled. It was on the news. The doctor had never seen anything like it. He wrote a book about it. I've got a signed copy on that shelf. She gestured proudly to a bookshelf in the corner. "It was the cholesterol, of course. I told Harold about the cholesterol, but he didn't believe in it." She paused for a moment, face solemn, and then shrugged. "You can sit wherever you'd like, sweetie, but it is haunted. I have to tell you that, for liability reasons," she smiled. "Because of the ghosts." "Ah, good," Erling said, unconvincingly. Belle said nothing. She just gazed at the waitress, doe-eyed in admiration. Sruthi clapped her hands together, back to business. "Coffee to start?" "Yes, please," Erling said. "Won't be a tick," Sruthi beamed, and swept back into the kitchen. Belle sighed. "Can she be my real mum?" "Anything's possible," Erling replied, and paused. Belle was staring at his seat longingly. "Do you want to sit in the ghost seat?" Yes, I do." Once Erling and Belle had swapped seats, they turned to their menus. They were impressive tomes, each menu a thick binder with some 200 laminated, illustrated, full-color pages, including an index and several appendices. "There's a 2-page spread dedicated to fresh oysters," Erling said. "We're 1,000 miles away from the nearest ocean." "They do an omelette with 18 different kinds of meat in it," Belle observed. "Chicken, bacon, and lamb, but also pheasant, spotted dingo, star-nosed sloth. Some of these are cryptids, I think." Sruthi returned with a steaming pot of coffee and 2 kitschy coffee cups shaped like happy chickens. "What can I get you folks?" the waitress asked, paper and pen at the ready. Erling glanced again at the menu, but it raised more questions than answers. "I'll just have eggs. Quite a lot of eggs, please, and bacon." Sruthi jotted on her pad. Erling frowned. "Bacon from a pig, please," he added, just to be sure. Sruthi nodded and made an additional note. "And for the lady?" She turned to Belle. "Do you do chicken waffles?" "We certainly do. Have you perused our butter menu?" "Oh, I haven't," Belle said, searching the index for butter. "No, the butter menu is in a supplementary volume," Sruthi explained. "I can fetch it if you'd—" No, thank you so much," Belle said. "That sounds amazing, but I'll just have whatever you recommend. Whatever's your favorite," she smiled. "Excellent choice," Sruthi enthused. "I'll have that right out for you." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Just watch out for Harold. He's my husband. Chicken waffles are his favorite." She touched her finger to her nose, winked, and then returned to the kitchen. "I didn't say what kind of eggs I wanted," Erling realized. "I hope they're from a chicken." "Could be lizard," Belle said, hopefully. She poured coffee for them both. Then she grabbed a bottle of maple syrup on the table, and with an expression of great concentration began to pour maple syrup into her coffee. "'Cuz," she said as she poured, "where are you going?" She kept her eyes on the amber stream of syrup pouring into her coffee. Erling grimaced, glanced out the window, out the wall. "I need some time. Need to sort out some things. Need to get a different headspace, you know? Belle frowned. No, I don't know at all. You don't talk to me anymore, Earl. Haven't come to the barn dances in months. Auntie says you're like a zombie at the farm. I've tried to call. What's going on with you? Erling stared at Belle's coffee. She was still pouring syrup into it. Earl, talk to me. Enough with the syrup, Erling snapped. Jesus, do you want to end up like Harold? He was too loud. The old woman at the counter glanced at him curiously. Belle met Erling's eyes, startled. Slowly and deliberately, she stopped pouring and eyed him darkly as she sipped from her chicken mug. Erling closed his eyes for a moment. Sorry, Belle. Sorry. Look, I haven't been sleeping. My head is not right. I need a doctor. A doctor? Why didn't you say? I know a great doctor. Erling was dubious. A doctor or a dealer? You can be both, Belle protested. Seriously, I've been seeing him for years. He's just a few towns down the road from here. A proper holistic neuropractitioner he is. A herbalist, vibe chemist. You need sleep, anxiety, uppers, downers, diagonals, whatever you need. He'll sort you out. Diagonals? Look, he's an expert, a professional. He's your guy. I don't know, Belle. You know that I'm not into that stuff. Well, where the hell else are we going? She said, exasperated. You don't actually have a plan, do you? Where are we going? Erling sighed. He didn't know where the word we came from. He had intended to travel alone, but Belle was right. He didn't have a plan. Fine, we can visit your dealer. Doctor, she insisted. Erling shrugged. What's his name? Big Rev Crowley. Erling snorted into his coffee. Oh, Belle exclaimed. Here's the waffles. The food was good. Bacon was perfect, and the eggs were from chickens, as best Erling could tell. Belle sang the praises of her chicken waffles. I never had butter like that. Ever. Not ever. She left a few morsels on her plate, though. For Harold, she said solemnly. Erling and Belle both slumped back in their seats in satisfied silence. The sun outside had risen. It peered weak and pale through a veil of smoke. There was no one on the road, no patrons at the adjoining gas station. Erling noticed that the old woman at the counter was done with her coffee and was glancing at him again. They made eye contact. Erling smiled politely, and the woman took it as an invitation. She ambled to their booth unsteadily. Decorative medallions on colourful ribbons jangled from her grey hair. Her face was wind-worn and tattooed. Her breathing was laboured, but she was persistent. Belle slid across Harold's seat to make room for her. Thank you, dear, the woman said, as she settled in to the ghost seat. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation earlier. She looked to Erling. Sleep troubles, eh? There's lots of folks having sleep troubles round here. Erling blinked through his food coma. Oh, yeah? Aye, all up and down Calamac country. The woman spoke quietly, almost a whisper, and Erling had to lean in close to hear her. He'd really prefer to just sit and digest his lizard eggs in peace, but the woman didn't stop. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were piercing, fixed on Erling. Lot of folks having nightmares, she said. That got Erling's attention. Belle glanced at him warily, and the woman continued. It's because of the horses, you know. The horse smoke makes everybody sick. At that, Belle rolled her eyes. Erling knew what Belle thought about horse activists. There's always been horse burning in Calamac, Belle declared. Since forever. It's our heritage. Horse burners built this country. She gestured broadly at their surroundings, as though their granddad had built this very diner. The old woman turned to Belle. The medallions in her hair tinkled softly. "Aye, there's been burning for a good long time. For as long as there's been people here, they say. It all used to be mostly horse ranches, of course. Good, wholesome family businesses. I'm sure you know all about that." She glanced at Erling and turned back to Belle. "But things have changed lately, haven't they, since the Bureau moved in? Now most of the ranchers sell their horses to the Bureau for burning, up in that new plant in the hills, a facility funded by ministers on far-flung coasts and built by overseas contractors. Is that our heritage, girl?" Belle's face darkened. She turned to Erling. "We don't need to sit and be lectured, cuz we've broken fast and the road needs hitting." She stood, but the old woman didn't move from the booth to let her pass. "But where's your trusty steed, girl?" she said. "I saw the horse you rode in on, galloping down that there road. I can still smell the horse on you, and I saw the Bureau's brand on its flank." She chuckled. "Curious that. The Bureau has strict rules on the use of their livestock, and they're notorious sticklers for enforcement. If they knew that some farm girl and her boyfriend were galloping down the 75 on one of their burn animals, that could stir some real trouble for a wholesome family farm." Belle glowered. "Drink your syrup, girl," the woman said. Belle sat. Erling knew the woman was right. The Bureau's inspectors had visited the farm several times, and each time Mother's anxiety was palpable. The Bureau's agents were exacting, and their decisions final. If the Bureau cut them off for breaking their regulations, stopped buying their horses, it could ruin them. Money had been perilously tight since Dad died. That's why they'd started selling to the Bureau in the first place. Erling cut the shit. "What do you want?" he asked the woman. She shrugged. "I want a great many things. New hips, for a start. And I want my poor dead Jack Russell back, the most faithful man I ever had. But no, dear, I don't want you to give me anything. I want to give you something. An invitation." Belle huffed and groaned. Erling stayed stone-faced. "Some friends of mine are staying in Yarna down the way. An old horse farm, not so different to your own, I'm sure. I suggest you pay them a visit. Stay a few nights. Listen to what they have to say. You'll find it enlightening." "What the fuck sort of blackmail is this?" Belle shook her head. "We're not joining your bloody commune. Report me to the Bureau if you want. I'll deny it. You can't prove anything." "Oh, Sruthi," the woman called over her shoulder. Turned out she had a loud, clear voice when she wanted to. "Yes, Sruthi, dear?" Sruthi replied, popping back in from the kitchen with soapy dishes in her hands. "Did you see that wonderful horse that this fine young lady rode past your diner earlier?" "Oh my, yes, the lovely chestnut," Sruthi replied. "Quite daring to go for a forbidden ride, in public no less, though I once did the same when I was your age. That was how I met Harold." She winked and returned to the kitchen. Old Tara turned back and lowered her voice again. "See, Sruthi has a wonderful memory. She remembers everyone who comes by her diner, and she'll happily share her recollections with anyone who comes asking." Belle scowled. Erling kneaded his forehead. "So," he said, "how do we get to Yarna?" They passed 14 dead animals by the road that day. They passed 3 gas stations, 1 dry lake, and Belle complained 136 times. "That crazy bitch," she said. "Psycho hippie coot. Who does she think she is? Would have left us be if I'd slapped a Sea Shepherd sticker on the bloody horse's ass. What are we supposed to do at her clubhouse? Eat magic mushrooms and braid each other's hair? I could do that at fucking home. Earl, if we get Jonestowned by a bunch of horse-hugging geriatrics, I will haunt that geezer so hard I'll team up with Harold, and with her Jack Russell too. We'll put a horse head in her bed if she loves them so much. Put bloody ectoplasm in her tea." Belle went on like that for 300 miles, and with each mile, Erling's head hurt worse. He could smell smoke. He could taste it. The sun came down to touch the hills. The shadows grew long. The creatures of dusk came sniffling from their burrows. Erling saw a lone deer nosing through sparse shrubbery. Bats flitted out from crevices in the hills, up into the purpling sky. Belle took over driving, and mostly stopped ranting. Erling stretched out in the back seats. He closed his eyes, and his headache eased. "Yana is another day's drive away," Belle said, "but the Rev's place is just down the road from here. He'll let us crash at his place, as long as we buy something." Earl saw Belle's smile on the rearview mirror. She turned on the radio and sang to herself until they reached the Rev's place. Big Rev Crowley was not what Earl imagined. He was small, for one thing. A slight, soft-spoken man in a neat collared shirt who could have been anywhere from 30 to 50 years old. He did not seem surprised to see Belle and Erling trudging up his driveway at night. "Lovely to see you, Isabel." He gave her a warm hug. "And you must be Erling. I've heard so much about you." Erling got a hug too. Crowley was a hugger. "Please, come round back," he said. Crowley's backyard was illuminated by warm light from within the house. He had a pot of tea steaming by a comfortable-looking chair. In his yard were tomatoes and cabbages growing in raised planters, guarded by a friendly-looking scarecrow. There were a few fruit trees and some kind of decorative astronomical contraption made of rusting iron. Along the back fence were rows of wooden cages and enclosures. Belle swept up to one and greeted a marmoset with great enthusiasm. The monkey chittered back excitedly. "I look after injured animals," Crowley explained to Erling. "Nurse them back to health until they're ready to go free. It started with a coyote that got hit by a bike, but pretty soon folks all around Calamac started coming to me with crook wildlife, and now I've got a zoo on my hands." He laughed heartily, and the crow's feet by his eyes crinkled. Erling nodded with interest. In one cage he saw a squirrel with its tiny arm in a plaster cast. In another was a badger with a plastic cone around its head. In one cage was a wombat with a band-aid on its nose, glaring at Erling grumpily. "Show him the fish, too," Belle said. So Crowley took them inside, down a hall, and into a room full of water and glinting light. There were fish tanks along each wall, stacked atop each other from floor to ceiling. Lights behind the tanks shimmered and refracted through the water as colorful tropical fish danced amongst seaweed and whimsical aquarium decorations. The water, light, and fish were all in gentle motion around them. It felt surreal and dreamy, calming and hypnotic. "I bought the fish for strategic reasons, originally," Crowley said. "Aquariums like these require frequent deliveries of many unusual chemicals and equipment, so I found them to be an excellent smokescreen for the packages I receive and send for my pharmaceutical business. No one thinks my deliveries suspicious. They must be for the fish, you see. Of course, I have to be careful not to mix up my pharmaceuticals with my aquarium supplies, or else my customers get fish food and my fish get high." He smiled. Speaking of which, what can I do for you two today? Is it the usual for you, Belle? No, Belle said. Well, yes, my vape's running low, actually. But also, Erling would like a consultation. I'm sorry to spring him on you, but you said that you're always... Crowley hushed her with a smile. Of course, Isabel, a friend of yours is a friend of mine. Erling, would you like to take a seat? Although they were surrounded by fish habitats, the only furniture for humans in the room were a few cushions set about a low table in the center of the room. Crowley sat cross-legged, and Erling followed suit. I'll feed the animals out back, Belle said. Terry looked hungry. Not too much, Crowley said, as Belle headed back outside. Terry had a big breakfast. Terry? Erling asked. The marmoset is Belle's favorite, Crowley explained. Erling nodded and paused. How often does Belle come out here? It's a long drive. Every couple of months or so, Crowley said. Huh, said Erling. He had no idea. He'd known Belle forever. She was like a sister growing up, but there was so much he didn't know about her. But we're not here to talk about Belle, Crowley said gently. What brought you here, Erling? In a tank behind Crowley, a yellow fish swam by. From Erling's perspective, it looked as though the fish swam inside Crowley's right ear and exited out his left. Erling couldn't help but chuckle. When he left home this morning, he didn't know where he was going, but he hadn't imagined this. Something funny? Crowley asked mildly. He had brown eyes. The hair at his temples was starting to grey. Erling shook his head. No, he said. No, look, Belle just thought that I should see a doctor. I've had headaches and some sleep problems, you know. I get tired sometimes. Crowley nodded, listening attentively, as though what Erling had to say was the most important thing in the world to him. Erling shrugged, looked at a fish, looked down at the table. I can handle it, Erling said. It's just dreams, you know. Everyone has dreams. I just need to stop thinking about them all the time, hyper-fixating. I just need to let the dreams stay in the pillow, you know? That's what Mother told me when I had nightmares as a kid. She said nightmares are scary, but they stay in the pillow, so when you wake up, you leave them behind, and a nightmare can't trouble you in the day. So I just need to leave them in the pillow, don't I? Shouldn't stop me working when there's horses to feed and fences to check. I just got to deal with it. The dreams aren't anything. Crowley nodded again. What happens in your dreams? Erling trembled. He could hear his own breathing. His vision narrowed like he was in a long, dark tunnel. He couldn't move his neck. He knew that if he tried to speak, his voice would break. He smelled lavender and ash, and his heart thumped so hard it hurt. The Reverend didn't push him, didn't fuss. He just sat patiently, still and serene. Crowley was content to just exist in the space, together with the fish and the light and the water, together with Erling. For a time, they just existed together. Erling focused on breathing. Inhale, exhale. And slowly, eventually, his anxiety subsided, breath by breath, until he could speak again. I need to stop the dreams, Erling said in a low, dark voice. I need to stop dreaming. He looked back up at Crowley. You must have something for that. Your pharmaceuticals. You must have something to stop dreams. Crowley gave a sad smile. Yes, Erling, I do have drugs that prevent dreaming. Many. There's hydroxyl cyanide, diazephrine 12, and some of my aquarium chemicals will do the job. He sighed. Yes, there's many ways to stop dreams, and all of them are lethal. I'm sorry, Erling, but the only way to stop dreaming is to stop living. Behind Crowley, a group of fish drifted past, like a silver cloud. Crowley continued. My teacher, Ranapada, said that dreams are the shadows cast by the light of life. You cannot run from dreams any more than you can run from your shadow, nor can you fight your shadow. As long as you live in the light, you live with shadows. You will dream. So there's no escape? Erling said. We always cast a shadow, Crowley said, but the shape of our shadow is a reflection of our own form. Dreams reflect our reality. Our night reflects our day. To change your dreams, you must change your reality. He leaned forward. Erling, what is it in your life, in your reality, that is casting such dark shadows? Erling opened his mouth, but then he heard thumping from down the hall, and Bell burst into the room. Several fish darted aside, startled. Terry, Bell said, distraught. Terry has escaped. They stood outside in the backyard as the night's first stars twinkled above. Terry, Bell called. Terry, come back. She turned to Crowley with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Rev. I had just opened the cage to feed him and to scratch his belly how he likes. I turned around just for a moment to grab more seeds and nuts, just for a second, I swear, and he was gone. I heard him scrabble across the neighbour's shed. How will we find him? We've got to go and where is he gone? Crowley put a sympathetic hand on her shoulder. Bell embraced him and sobbed into his shirt. It's okay, Bell, Crowley said. I knew this would happen someday. You did? Bell sniffed. Yes. Terry had been restless for months. His tail has fully healed. It was time for him to move on. He was ready to roam free. Crowley smiled, and there were tears in his eyes too, glimmering in the starlight. Godspeed, Terry. Godspeed, you beautiful monkey. Crowley and Bell cried together for a moment, and then they all went back inside for wine and fruit. Crowley and Bell shared tales of Terry's exploits, and toasted his bright future as a free monkey. Then they turned in for the night. There was a sofa bed for Erling and Bell. Lying in bed next to Bell, listening to her snoring, Erling was not so sure if rural Kalamack was an appropriate habitat for Terry the marmoset, but he couldn't help but smile at Bell and Crowley's optimism. And when he slept that night, he didn't have the lavender nightmare. He dreamed of a brave marmoset roaming the wide plains of Kalamack. They left Crowley's place in the morning. His menagerie squawked and chittered as they said their farewells in the yard. Erling thanked Crowley for his advice, and Bell bought a sizable box of vape juice. They pulled out of the driveway and left Crowley with his animals, and his fish, and his vast stock of Class A narcotics. Erling drove out of town and turned east onto the Route 75. Wait. Where are we going? Bell asked, puffing on her vape. The vapor smelled like strawberry lamingtons. Yana, Erling replied. Yana? She coughed. For the old hag at the diner? Seriously, let's just go home, Earl. We won't get reported or anything. Tara was just fucking with us. No, I don't think she was, Erling said, eyes fixed ahead. In the sky, above the hills, he saw smoke. It cast a dark haze against the sunlight. I want to see this through. He paused. Do you want me to leave you back at Crowley's? I can pick you up on the way back, if you want. Bell frowned and drew from her vape. She squinted at him like she was trying to see inside Erling's head. No, no. I'll come with you, cuz. Let's meet the mad hippie's friends. Yana had seen better days. An old roadside sign proclaimed it the jewel on the Kalamack River, but the river had been diverted away by a dam in the 40s, and now the pubs and shops overlooked only a dusty, dry riverbed. The sun was setting, and it was still hot. It had been a long day of driving. They needed somewhere to stay the night, but there was only one motel, and its proprietor said they were full. "No vacancies," he said. The man had his feet on the reception desk and was watching esports on a small CRT television. Wiry chest hair protruded above his shirt. "What, are there a lot of visitors in town tonight?" Belle asked sarcastically. She got sarcastic when she was tired. "A business convention on? Or a big show tonight at the Yana Auditorium, eh?" Erling nudged her to be quiet. "Would we find accommodation at the next town over? Where's closest?" The proprietor glanced up from his television, looked Erling up and down. "Gotta make a call," he said, and ambled out the door behind the front desk. Belle fumed. "There's no way this place is full," she said to Erling. "We didn't see anyone in town. No lights on in the windows. This is a ghost town, Earl. What are we doing here?" Erling found an old map pinned to the wall and tried to decide which nearby towns looked promising. There was South Yamshire, Gardow-on-Mac, Piralee. Belle pointed at a corner of the map. "Printed in 34, she read. "This map is from before the dam was built. Piralee might be under the bloody river now." Erling tapped his foot on the ground anxiously. What had he gotten them into? He didn't want to sleep in the car tonight. The front door jangled, and in stepped a tall, older man in a singlet and jeans. He wore a faded blue bucket hat and had tattoos on his arms and neck. They reminded Erling of Tara's tattoos. "You must be Erling and Isabel," he said. His accent was old Kalamack. Part of his left ear was missing. "Who says we are?" Erling said, guarded. "Tara sent me," he said, matter of fact. "Name's Kevroy. I'm here to bring yous to Tara's folks." Belle shook her head in disbelief. "And where are these folks, exactly, Kevroy?" "The farm is a ways out of town. No access by car, so I'll take yous on me quad bike." Kevroy gave a toothy smile. Behind them, the hotel proprietor returned and put his feet back on the desk. "Kev," he nodded. "Steve?" Kev nodded back. Belle glared at the proprietor. "No vacancies, my arse. They're working together, Earl." The proprietor shrugged. Belle laughed. "You've got to be shitting me. Earl, we're not going to Kevroy's creepy cabin in the woods. I don't want to get wolf-creeked tonight." Erling nodded slowly, thinking. She was right. It would be stupid to go with Kevroy. "I'm going with Kevroy," he said. Belle looked at him startled, brown eyes wide in surprise. Erling felt surprised himself. "Take the car if you want to leave, but I'm going with Kevroy." "Sorry, Belle." Belle fumed. "You're impossible. You know that, Earl?" She glared at Kevroy. "If anyone tries anything funny, I know Krav Maga. I've got bear spray in my purse, the illegal kind. I've got 2 dads, and they're both like Liam Neeson." She puffed on her vape angrily. Kevroy chuckled, raised his hands in surrender. "Look, I'm sorry for the dagger and cloak. Don't mean to scare yous, but Tara is a stickler for operational security. That's how we stay safe, eh?" Belle kept frowning. "You're not helping, Kevroy." She turned to Erling. "If we get eaten by these maniacs, you're getting eaten first, okay?" She turned back to Kevroy. "There better be s'mores at your clubhouse. I'm hungry." So they drove off on Kevroy's quad bike. Erling sat behind Kevroy, holding the stranger's bony shoulders, and Belle held on to Erling. They turned off-road and followed dusty tracks through the farmland in the dusk. Erling couldn't much tell where they were going. They wound up and around shrubby hills, through gates, past the occasional goat. If they were going to be eaten, Erling was at least enjoying the fresh air. The bike was electric, so it was quiet enough that they could still talk. Kevroy pointed out wildlife as they went. There were small round holes in the hills where burrowing owls made their nests. Erling saw 2 yellow reflective eyes watching them from one burrow. There were dead trees adorned with spiderwebs that glowed silver in their headlights. There were the native mice that mated for life and hopped across the dust in pairs. Erling had lived in Kalamak all his life, but he'd never known these creatures had existed so close to his home. Kev got talking about life in Yarna. "I used to work at the butcher shop in town, me and me mum, but when the river dried up and the farms went broke, there weren't no more animals to butcher. Most folks left town, but I stayed to look after me mum. And Tara, she looked after us. She's been good to folks here. Changed my mind on a lot of things. Meat, for one thing. I'm vegan now. A vegan butcher, can you believe it?" He chuckled. "So I ain't gonna eat you, Bill. I can promise you that." Kevroy stopped for a moment at the crest of a hill and turned off the headlights. "Perfect night to see the stars," he said. As their eyes adjusted to the dark, the Milky Way came to life above them. "See the red one? That's Mars," Kevroy pointed. "It's like magic," Bell murmured. Erling's gaze drifted down towards the horizon. In the north, the stars were faint. They were blocked by smoke, he realized, rising from orange lights in the distant hills. "What are those lights in the hills?" he asked. Kevroy sniffed and spat. "The new horse plants. Bureau facilities." He turned to face Erling and Bell, and Earl saw the whites in Kevroy's eyes. "That's why we're out here. For the horses." In that moment, the amiable charm was gone from Kevroy's voice. There was only a grim determination. "Let's keep moving," he said, and jolted them back into motion. Erling's heart stumbled. Bell gripped Erling's shoulders tighter. They stayed silent until they reached the farm. "We're here," Kevroy declared, slowing the quad bike to a halt. It was full night now. Erling saw the red star above them, like it had followed them. Bell frowned. "Here?" "Yep," Kevroy said, dismounting the bike. "The others are round back." Kevroy put the keys to his quad bike in his left pocket. Erling made a mental note of that, just in case. He met Bell's eyes. She looked anxious too. Erling hoped he hadn't brought Bell into danger, but he was glad that she was with him. They were at an abandoned farm, much like several others that they'd passed along the way. There was nothing left but a few dilapidated sheds and warehouses. Old farm equipment cast eerie silhouettes in the dark, but Erling saw the glow of firelight and heard laughter. Kevroy led them behind the shed, where they found 2 women sitting around a campfire, one old and one young. They were cooking something that smelled delicious. True to Kevroy's word, it was not human meat. It was tofu. "Kev, come over here, you lovely knucklehead," the old woman said. "You almost missed dinner." She had grey dreadlocks and a colourful scarf, and a smile with no teeth. "Hey, Ma," Kevroy said, and leaned down to kiss his mother on the cheek. The younger woman stood to give Kevroy a hug. "We thought you'd be back by lunchtime, Uncle Kev." "Sorry, Ness. It took a bit longer than we'd thought." Kev shrugged. "But Tara delivered. She always does." He turned towards Erling and Bell. "Tara brought us what we need." Kevroy, his ma, and Ness all stared at Erling and Bell. Erling took a step back. Bell took a step forward. "Okay, cut the shit, guys," she said. "We came a long way to be here. Your friend Tara blackmailed us. made us drive for 2 days. I could be at Sruthi's place right now, eating waffles, so you need to explain to me what you want from us." She glanced at the pan on the campfire. "And I need some of that. What is that? Tofu? I'm starving." Kevroy glanced at Ma. She nodded. "Okay," Kevroy said. "Here's the truth." Ma served generous steaming bowls of tofu and veg, as Kevroy explained. "We're an activist group," he said. "We fight for animal rights, specifically in agriculture, and we're here in Yana to try and stop horse burning." Belle snorted, but her mouth was too full of tofu to speak. "We've been protesting for decades, organized rallies in the city, spoken to local government, state government, media, knocked on 100 horse farmers' doors. We were making progress, but then the Bureau moved in," Ness said darkly. She gazed out at the hills where the new horse plants were glowing orange, like distant embers in the dark. "The new plants are huge," Kevroy said. "This isn't the traditional, local horse-burning ritual anymore. These are industrial furnaces. They're not phasing out burning, they're doubling down. Lots of folks are against it, but the Bureau pays good. The plants create a lot of jobs, desperately needed jobs out here. And with all the grants and subsidies getting thrown around, you know the local reps and council are getting their cut." "Bastards," Ma said mildly. "Bastards," Kevroy agreed. "Of course, it's only possible because farmers are supplying the horses." He gazed at Erling and Belle. Belle swallowed. "That's what this is about? You reckon if you threaten us and ply us with tofu, Erling will give up his family's horse farm? Our families have always been here, on this land. We are Kalamak, and so is horse burning. We won't just give that up." "We know," Kevroy said, sadly. "We know words aren't enough. People need to see." A shiver went down Erling's spine. Ma turned to Belle. "This place was my father's horse farm," she said. "I was much like you at your age. I was proud to be Kalamak and proud to burn horses. Then I saw what the burning really meant." She stood, slowly. "Follow me, dears," she said. Erling stood. Belle did not. "Please, Belle," Kevroy said. "See what we have to show you. And if you still want to leave, we won't stop you. Tara agrees. This is all we ask." "We'll go," Erling said. "Show us the way." Ma led them to one of the old buildings. As they approached, Erling saw it was a sturdy brick structure with no windows. A huge round chimney rose from the roof, the silhouette eerie against the stars. Belle laughed. "It's a horse furnace. You trying to scare us with this? There's one just like this at Erling's farm. Me and my dad helped herd the horses in every season since I was 8. Ma nodded. "Yes," she said sadly. "There are thousands of furnaces like this all across Kalamak. But tell me, Belle, have you ever been inside a horse furnace?" Belle frowned. "Am I a horse? Of course I haven't been inside a horse furnace. Why would I?" Ma nodded. "It's a very old ritual, Belle. Old rules. The horses go into the furnace, and nothing comes out but smoke. For a person to go inside the furnace would be unclean, spiritually. That's what my father told me, and his father him. A furnace is a sacred place, a place for awe and whispers, a place for eyes to close in humility. You believe that, don't you, Belle?" Belle was quiet. She gazed at the furnace, its shadow towering over them. "I used to think just like you, Belle. It was only by chance that I was forced to step inside this place, to take shelter in a thunderstorm. This is where it all changed for me." Starlight glimmered in Ma's eyes, illuminated the ridges and valleys on her wrinkled face. Ma took a step towards Belle. "Look, girl, I know you're afraid. It's not easy to go against the old—" "Fine," Belle said. She shook her head, snorted. "You want us to look inside? We'll look inside, and then we'll go. Fine with us. Come on, Earl." "Earl?" Erling was standing a few steps back from Belle and Ma. His head was pounding. Ma's old horse furnace looked just like the furnace at his farm. In the dark, he felt dislocated, as though he actually was home again. He remembered running around his farm as a child, playing with Belle. He remembered coming down the driveway to greet his mum when she came back from town. He remembered his father teaching him how to drive the old beat-up ute. The furnace loomed over all those memories like a black stain on a favorite garment that he had somehow never seen before. He stood reeling in the shadow of the furnace. He saw dark clouds roiling. He could smell the ash. Belle's hand grabbed his shoulder. "Come on, Earl. Let's just duck inside, then we can go home. We'll take some tofu to go. The hippies owe us that much." Ma opened the heavy iron door into the furnace. The metal screeched, and Belle marched Erling forward, down the long brick gullet. They tripped and stumbled over uneven, sandy ground, and then slowed to a stop in the center of the furnace. It was dark inside, but the roof above was damaged, so some starlight filtered in, and as their eyes adjusted, the scene around them came into focus. "Oh, fuck," Belle said. They were up to their ankles in ash and bone. Some skeletons were partly intact. Erling recognized horse skulls and rib cages, but most of the bones were smashed, pounded into dust by frantic hooves. There were hoof marks on the walls as well, dents beaten into the metal by desperate, burning animals. Hundreds of them. Generations. They've always done burning in Kalamak. Since forever. Erling coughed at the ash and dust stirred up by their intrusion. There were layers upon layers of ash. In the corners it piled up to waist height. It was horses, he knew. They were surrounded by it, breathing it. The ash was horses. "Oh, fuck," Belle said again. And then the door closed behind them. Ma sealed it shut. Belle's eyes went wide. She dashed back to the entrance, kicking up clouds of ash, skittering fragments of bone. "Let us out!" she screamed, hammering at the door. "Let us out now!" But there was no reply. Erling knew it was no use. He sank down into the ash and bone. He could hear the horses screaming. There were ghosts now, but he heard the burning horses scream. The screams and pain and fear turned into smoke, and it spewed up into the sky, and all the smoke from all the furnaces across Kalamak, it rose and formed an evil cloud that choked everyone below. It was the storm in his nightmare, the lavender field with the winds screaming around him. He was trapped in the ash and the smoke, and he had always been trapped here. Belle ran back to Erling and shook him. "Help me break the door," she said, panicked. "We can't." Erling shook his head. "The horses couldn't get out, neither can we," he said. "This is what the burning is. At the farm, at all the farms, all the furnaces. This is what we do." Belle bared her teeth like an animal. She clawed at the walls, tried to climb up to the broken roof, but it was too high. She kicked at the walls, but they were too strong. She could not even leave a hoof mark. Erling lay in the ash, immobile. Belle cried herself to sleep. In the morning, the door opened. Erling and Belle staggered out like shades from a crypt, grey with ash from head to toe. Ma, Kevroy, and Ness watched them come, with faces solemn. "We'll help you," Belle said. Her eyes were hard. "You crazy assholes. We'll help you. The horses, it needs to stop. Kevroy drove them up into the hills on his quad bike and explained the plan. "You're going to infiltrate the new horse plant, the big one. Tara got us an access pass. Don't ask me how, but the pass will get you two inside. We'd go in ourselves, but they'd recognize us. They know we're activists, and we've given them trouble already. They'd never let us anywhere near the plant. But you two are fresh faces, and horse farmers besides, prospective partners. That's why Tara chose you two at the diner. You are our ticket in." "And what do we do once we're inside?" Belle asked. She was grim, determined. Erling had never seen her like this before. It scared him. "We blow the place up," she said. Kevroy laughed. "Well, sure, if that's an option, but the plan is you get in and film inside the furnace. The ash, the bone, all the grisly truth that we're not meant to see. We got to get that on tape and show it to the world. Once everybody sees what industrial horse burning really looks like, there'll be an outcry. Once they see, no one can ignore that horror. And then we get these monstrous plants shut down for good, and not a horse ever need burn again." Belle nodded. Erling was quiet. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right track. This was the way out of his nightmare. He knew it. This was the way to stop the smoke.
"Good morning," Belle beamed. "I'm Dr. Krasnetsky, and this is my assistant, Wilbur."
Belle took the hand of the security man and shook it vigorously. The man clung on and tried not to spill the coffee in his other hand. The security man was stationed outside the main entrance of the horse facility. According to his name tag, his name was Mick. Mick wore a crisp ironed shirt and a shiny leather belt. He was short, with a square blocky head and square blocky shoulders, like a mini-fridge. Erling tried to look like a Wilbur. The aliases were Belle's idea.
"We're here for the safety inspection," Belle smiled. "You should have gotten an email about it last quarter, or the previous quarter, rather. Fractions, am I right? Anyway, you'll be wanting to see this."
Belle flashed the access passes that Kevroy had given them. Mick squinted at them.
"We'd best begin our inspection immediately," Belle said. "Unless, I say, is that coffee cooled to regulation temperature?"
Belle leaned forward to inspect the coffee in the man's hand.
"Scalding is a very serious workplace hazard, you know. I would hate to have to write a report."
Mick pressed a button, and the gate behind him opened.
"Thank you, sir, and do have a wonderful morning,"
Belle said, and strode inside the plant with Erling at her heels. "That was ridiculous, Belle. You're going to blow our cover," Erling hissed, as they proceeded down a hallway into the facility.
"We should just say that we're horse farmers. We are horse farmers." "Please, Wilbur, your jealousy is unbecoming. Just because I'm the regional head of executive inspections—"
"This isn't a game, Belle. This is serious. We've got one chance to really make an impact here." Erling trailed off, and they came to a halt. Ahead, the hallway opened onto a balcony, overlooking the interior of the facility. The sight stunned Erling and Belle to silence. Inside the horse plant was a cavernous expanse, a vast industrial space filled with a fiery orange glow and a sulphurous heat. The ceiling was so high that the very air above them felt like an ocean pressing down upon them, silencing them. Thrust through the center of the space was a gargantuan smokestack, a towering brick chimney the size of an apartment block. It extended all the way up through the plant and penetrated out to the roof above. And below the smokestack, at the infernal heart of the facility, was the furnace, an enclosed pit of black steel, fed by pipes that coiled and twisted like intestines, with a gaping maw of fire that spewed smoke into the chimney above. On the ground were the horses, Hundreds of them, standing on the concrete floor in stalls and enclosures with steel railings and feed bins and hoses and drains. The animals twitched their tails, snorted, wickered nervously. Erling could see the fires of the furnace flickering in the horses' eyes. He wondered how many had been burned today. Despite the massive chimney and the hum of ventilation fans, the whole place stank of smoke and soot and horse. Erling felt the nightmare rise to life inside him and felt the storm swirling in his head. He wanted nothing more than to flee, to run back to his car and to drive far, far away from here. But he knew now that he couldn't outrun his shadow. This was the source of the horse smoke, the darkness that choked his dreams. This was the one chance to end the nightmares. "The camera, Bell," Erling said. "Start filming." Bell fumbled at her shoulder bag and pulled out the camera that Kevroy had given them. It was a clunky old tape recorder, but it was their best hope of defeating this diabolical place. Bell started recording and slowly panned the camera around the facility, showing the horses, the chimney, the furnace. Eyes wide, Bell was uncharacteristically quiet. "We have to get down there," Erling said, staring below, down to the furnace. They made their way down a metal staircase, slowly. Erling heard the huffing and snorting of horses, the fans of ventilation whirring, the constant fiery breath of the furnace spewing smoke. Strange currents swirled through the cavernous space, carrying sound strangely, stinging at Erling's eyes. Instinctively they tread softly, tense, as though sneaking up on some slumbering monster. They got down to the level of the furnace and proceeded along a walkway towards a cluster of enclosed control rooms. Erling saw the fenced paths where horses were brought from the stalls up to the furnace. A ramp sloped down from there into the fire below. It was hot here. Erling felt the sweat bead on his brow. Every muscle in Erling's body begged him to turn back. He could see that Bell, too, was trembling, gripping the camera in clammy hands, but the only way to end this nightmare was ahead of them. "Hey!" A male voice thundered from behind them. Erling froze. His heart dropped. "Hey, you!" Heavy footsteps thumped up behind them, and a shadow fell over them. Erling turned and saw another security man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a voice that brooked no argument. The name tag on his chest said Mac. If Mick was a mini-fridge, then Mac was the full-sized refrigerator. "The CEO wants to see you," Mac said. "We're just here for the safety inspection," Bell stuttered. "My name is Dr. Krill—" "I know who you are, Isabel," Mac said. "Let me take that for you." The man grabbed the video camera from Bell. "Come with me. The CEO is just ahead." The man led them on towards the buildings by the furnace. Erling and Bell followed, helpless. Mac was too big to fight. They could run, but without their camera, all this was for nothing. The smell of smoke got stronger, and they could feel the heat from the furnace pouring at them in waves. In his mind's eye, the storm swirled. "In here," Mac said, and opened the door into a utility room ahead, and then he turned to go. "My camera," Bell said, and the man glanced at Bell, then looked at the camera in his hand, as though he'd forgotten it. He shrugged. Then Mac leaned over a railing and tossed the camera directly into the furnace. It disappeared into the flames, incinerated without a sound. Belle fell to her knees and made a tiny, soft sound of defeat. Erling just stared at the fire, mouth agape, and felt all hope leave his body, rising away like the endless black torrent of smoke into the sky above. And then He heard a familiar voice.
Erling, Isabel, come inside. I have coffee.
Erling turned slowly. Belle looked up in disbelief, then rose and staggered into the utility room.
What the fuck are you doing here?
Belle exclaimed. Erling followed. Sitting inside was Tara, the old woman they met at Sruthi's diner. She had taken the medallions out of her grey hair and put on some working overalls. Her face tattoos were the same, and her piercing bright eyes. She had a cup of coffee cooling on a nearby desk.
Hello, kids,
she said. Behind Tara, the room had no wall. It opened onto a pen with several horses and a railed walkway that led down into the furnace. The heat was sweltering here, and the smell of smoke was overwhelming. Erling saw flickering flames reflecting off Tara's glasses. "You're the CEO here?" Erling asked, in numb disbelief.
"Oh yes," Tara said. "CEO, CFO, and majority shareholder, and a consultant to the Bureau. I don't attend a lot of meetings, though. I prefer to stay focused on the work at hand." She smiled.
Tara stepped out to the stock pen and led a horse onto the walkway by the furnace. It was a beautiful mare with a rich red coat and a bureau barcode on its flank. They had horses like that at Erling's farm. Erling realized that this horse might well have come from Erling's farm. The horse balked at the heat and smoke rising from the furnace ahead, and Tara calmed it by stroking its mane and whispering reassurance.
"Hush, sweet thing. Hush, you're safe now," Tara said.
She produced a handful of dried fruit from her overalls and began feeding the horse.
"Hush, sweet thing," she said.
Tara and the horse were only meters away from the opening to the furnace. The great chimney was directly above them, a vast black tunnel into the sky.
"You lied to us,"
Belle said, scowling in confusion and outrage.
"Or you lied to Kevroy and Ma, at least. Why did you bring us here? Are you going to help us stop this place? To end horse burning, or not?"
Tara looked at Belle and chuckled.
"Sometimes I forget what it was like to be young," she said. "Do you really think it could have been this easy to bring down the whole horse-burning industry, the tradition, the heritage? You told me yourself that horse-burning is the pride of Kalamack. You think that we can stop all this with a videotape?"
Tara gazed at the burning pit with a deep and tired hatred. The fire cast deep shadows on her face. Tara left the horse on the walkway and took up some vials and measuring instruments from her workbench.
"We've made videotapes before, a dozen different exposés to the media. We've liberated horses from dozens of different ranches, infiltrated industry and government," Tara said as she worked. "We were sure we'd change the world back then, me and Kevroy and Ma. I turned Kevroy into a vegan, can you believe it? That man won hot dog eating competitions in his youth. You should have seen him go," she cackled. "If I could make that man love tofu, I could do anything, right?"
She flashed a smirk at Belle and Erling, then continued fiddling at her workbench.
"We made quite a team back then," Tara said. "The Kalamack Society for Animal Liberation, we called ourselves, which was a pretty rich name for a cramped student sharehouse. But I believed we'd succeed. I did. Kev and his ma still believe, bless them," she sighed. "They need to believe. After Ness came along and Marcy died, it all has to mean something to them."
Tara took out a large hypodermic needle.
"But I saw the truth," she said. "All the work we did for all those years, it changed nothing. Despite the politicians' promises, despite the public support and the unions, horse burning is increasing, not decreasing. Never mind that it makes no goddamn economic sense. You think this place makes profit? She exclaimed, gesturing at the massive facility. She laughed bitterly. Industrial horse burning is money laundering. It's alchemy, transforming tax revenue into corporate bonuses and jobs for the boys. These plants are a rort, and as long as patriotic horse farmers like yourselves keep cheering it on, it's never going to end. Tara was angry now, ranting. She gesticulated wildly with the hypodermic needle still in her hand. Erling was ready to bolt if Tara came anywhere near him with it. I knew there was one way to end it, Tara said. I'd have to do it from inside. You have no idea what I had to do to get here. Marrying that buffoon, my ex-husband, working the will to inherit his shares, and keeping all of this secret from Kev and Ma, the sacrifices that I've made. But this was the only way. The red horse on the walkway whickered. Tara went over to it and stroked it, hummed a little melody, and fed it more fruit. You're safe now, sweet thing, she said, and then she slid the needle into its neck, and the horse died. Erling gasped. The horse sank down slowly and thumped onto the metal walkway. Its eyes were still open. Tara knelt down and kissed the dead horse on the shoulder, and then she pressed a red button on the wall. A yellow light flashed, machines hissed, the walkway tilted, and the dead horse slid into the hellfire below. Belle gave a shriek of outrage. What are you doing? Don't you want to save the horses? Yes, Isabel, this is how we end it. The only way to stop horse burning is to burn all the horses. Belle barked out a scary, crazy laugh of disbelief. You what? Tara stepped towards them, a wild, glassy-eyed determination in her eyes. So long as there are horses in Kalamack, the bastards will keep burning them, breeding and burning and breeding and burning forever, from the wholesome family farms into the furnace. That is why I'm buying all the farms, don't you see? Tara brought another horse up from the pen onto the walkway. This one was jet black. I've done it through shell companies, mostly, names within names, trusts and co-ops. Kevroy technically owns a few farms now, though he doesn't know it. You wouldn't believe the paperwork, Belle. With times being how they are, most farmers are happy enough to sell their useless land. Those who resist, we can corner. With the subsidies, it's a piece of piss to monopolize the market. By my projections, I will own every horse in Kalamack by Christmas, and by New Year's, I will euthanize them all. That's how we save the horses. That's how we stop the burning forever. Tara stroked the black horse's mane and hummed a soothing melody. In her other hand, she held the needle. Tara turned to Erling. The only exception is you, Erling. Your family is the holdout, the only ranch still refusing to sell. That's why I brought you here. That's why I showed you this place. You need to sell me your family's horse farm so that I can finally have the last of the horses and finish my long labor. Tara produced a sheaf of papers and pressed a pen into Erling's hand. Sign, she said. Sign, and we end horse burning forever. I'll take your horses and your useless land, and you'll find your compensation to be more than adequate. A week ago, Erling would have taken the deal. It would be a relief to offload the responsibility of the farm, and the money could give him and his mum a better life. They could move far from Kalamack.
And so what if Tara would burn the horses? They were going to be burned anyway. That's what horses are for. But now, down by the heat of the flames, Erling knew he could not feed the storm. If he let Tara burn his horses, he would dream of storms and smoke for the rest of his life. "No," he said softly. He put down the pen. Tara glared at Erling, her eyes deadly and cold like a snake. "Erling," she said quietly, "you don't understand. I will get your horses. I have surmounted 1,000 obstacles to get here, and this is the last step. I will not let you stop me, Erling. I'm offering you an easy way out. Don't make this hard." The needle was still in Tara's hand. It glimmered in the orange light. The black horse behind Tara huffed and stamped. Perhaps it could sense Erling's fear, but somehow the choice was easy. "No," he said, louder this time. Tara bared her teeth in frustration. "Fine," she said. "We do this the hard way." But then Belle screamed, "Erling! Run!" She darted up and slapped the black horse hard on its flank. The horse reared up and knocked Tara hard against the metal railing. "Oi!" shouted a voice from above. Mac was thundering down the long metal staircase from above. They couldn't escape the way they came in. "There," Belle said, pointing at a big metal gate at ground level. "We can climb down from here." But Tara rose back up and grabbed Belle. "What are you doing, you little idiot?" Tara yelled. She held Belle by the front of her shirt, pulling them both dangerously close to the precipice of the furnace. "You're going to ruin everything. This is the only way to save them." Blood ran down Tara's wrinkled forehead. Belle struggled, panicking, trying to escape the old woman without losing balance. Below them, the fires roared hungrily. Mac was still several flights of stairs above them. "If I have to burn one more to save them, I will," Tara hissed at Belle. Erling wanted to run, but he stepped forward. He grabbed the old woman by the shoulders and wrenched her around. Belle staggered away from the edge. "This isn't the way," Erling shouted at Tara, but she was too far gone. There was a fever in her eyes, as though she was in the grip of a nightmare. Erling saw that she had a sprig of lavender pinned to her lapel. "This is the only way to stop the storm," she said, and in her eyes Erling saw a woman dancing. Tara picked up the hypodermic needle and raised it towards Erling, but then Belle came up behind Tara and grabbed her hand. "Enough," she said. Belle shoved the needle into Tara's neck and pushed the plunger all the way down. Tara's last breath came long and soft, and then she crumpled to the ground. Erling's eyes widened in horror. Belle stood panting, trembling, with the needle in her hand. "Oi!" Mac shouted again. He was closer now, descending the stairs 2 at a time. Erling grabbed Belle's shoulder and dragged her over to a ramp that led down towards the gate. He held her hand tight as they ran, stumbling, away from the furnace, away from Tara. Belle was puffing, sobbing, shaking. "The horses," she said. "We should free the horses." They ran past dozens of the animals in their pens, but Erling pulled Belle forwards as Mac cursed behind them. They reached the gate. Erling hit a button, and it began to rise. He smelled sweet, clean air outside. They might just escape. But when the gate opened, a man outside stood in their way, a shadow against the stars. It was Mick from the front gate. "Stop right there, Dr. Krisnetsky," he said. Belle laughed and sobbed. "They'll put me away, Earl. Don't let them put me away." Erling looked frantically for some other exit. Mac's footsteps were almost upon them. They were trapped. But he heard a sound from outside. Was it hoofbeats? All at once, a horse burst in through the gate, knocking Mick aside. It was a beautiful chestnut, and atop the horse was a young man wearing an ugly Hawaiian shirt and just one shoe. "Chico!" Erling exclaimed. "Hey, brother." Chico grinned. Then a small furry creature clambered up from Chico's back onto his shoulder. "Terry?" Belle cried. The marmoset chittered triumphantly. "Time to go, eh?" said Chico. He pulled Belle up onto the horse's back. "Erling!" Belle shouted. "Let's go, Earl!" Mac was just behind them, and Mick was finding his feet. Erling felt storm winds converging upon him. He saw the lavender field and saw himself in its center. He knew that here, at the eye of the storm, was his chance to change the currents and clear the skies. "No," he said. "What?" Belle yelled. "No, I'm staying. Belle, you've got to run. Get far away from here. You and Terry and Chico, lay low, but I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna tell people what really happened with Tara and Kevroy and this place. Maybe Tara was wrong. Maybe I can change it. I've still got the farm to look after, and someone has to care for all of these horses." Belle stared at Erling. Sweat ran down her brow. "Goodbye, cuz," she said softly. "Goodbye, Belle. Goodbye, Chico." Erling smiled. "Goodbye, Terry," the monkey chittered. "And thank you," Erling said to Belle. Chico hesitated. He looked his brother in the eye. Erling nodded, so Chico turned the chestnut horse and rode into the night. Mac reached Erling just in time to see Belle and Chico ride away. "You're in a lot of trouble, Wilbur," Mick said. But it didn't matter. Erling felt the cool, fresh air wash over him, meeting and mixing with the smoky heat at his back. He still felt his shadow. He still smelled smoke. But he knew that the winds were shifting. The future was changing because he was in it. Tonight, there would be no storm in his dreams.